Hey everyone, it's Lindsay, and I'm here today to share with you how to assemble the brand new Craftin Desert Divas truck dies from their truck die set. So when you get these dies, they're going to be completely connected like this. And I need to go ahead and start cutting these apart. Now I'm going to cut mine completely apart here. If you don't want to, you do not have to cut all the smaller ones apart. There are a total of 17 dies that will cut 20 pieces in this die set, so it can get a little overwhelming. So if you need to leave some of those smaller ones connected, feel free to do so. Also, you will end up getting little pokey parts on some of your dies, and you just seen that one fly across the room. Sometimes they'll do that. However, if you want to go ahead and watch my deal with it, separating your dies video, that will show you how after I separate my dies, I get rid of those little pokies on the edge of all your die sets. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit as I continue to separate these dies. And you might be tempted to leave them all together like they are and just run them through with different pieces of cardstock. However, I did try that, and there are some pieces in different spaces where you don't necessarily want them to cut out that space. Like you can see, I just removed dies from the back of that truck. And if you leave those there, they will cut out little shapes from the back of the truck. So it's best to just remove them. If you want to keep some of the smaller ones together though, that might be helpful. However, your dies normally come in a bag from Craftin Desert Divas, so if you store them in there, once you're finished with them, you shouldn't have any problem. And if you really want to be safe, you can always get a magnetic backing sheet and attach these to those. So once I have all of them separated from each other, I'm going to go back in with my wire cutters that I have here, and I am going to cut extremely close to that die cutting edge to get rid of all those little extra metal bits. Now normally this takes care of my issue with the pokiness of them. However, if you have some where you can't get in quite as close as you might need to, you can always come in with a cheap emery board and file away those metal shavings. Now, as you can see, I cut extremely close to these die cutting edges. You do want to be extremely careful when you're doing that, because if you get too close, you can actually end up ruining your die. So just if you feel any resistance with your wire cutters on the metal, stop. You don't want to cut through it. Those little bits should be nice and simple and almost effortless to clip off. So if you feel any resistance, just back away. There are a lot of dies in this set, and so this process does get a little tedious, going around and clipping off all of those little bits. However, because there are so many dies in this set, whenever you go to reach into the bag to pull out a certain die, you might end up poking yourself. It's just better to take the time and do this now rather than after you get cut. So on these dies, whenever you get to this point and you're inside of those little windows, it can get a little tricky. Just move your wire cutters around until you get the best angle that you possibly can. And like I said before, you can always go back with a cheap emery board and file away those metal shavings. Here you can see I have all of my dies separated, all of my little metal pieces are clipped off, so now my dies are all smooth on the edges, and I'm not going to cut myself whenever I handle them. Now over on my blog, I have the link in the description box below, but I have these diagrams that show what dies go with what truck and also the mailbox. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start die cutting. I die cut my 2 trucks from white cardstock. Now remember, this is just the colors I used. You can always switch them up and make them your own. This angled piece I am going to cut from red cardstock, and I am also going to cut the little flag for my mailbox from red. And there are also these 2 long rectangles and then 2 rectangles that are different sizes on the same die that I will also stick on, and I will cut those from red as well. Again, if you find diagrams more helpful, those are all over on my blog. So from black cardstock, I'm going to cut this circle, which will actually end up being the wheel on the side-facing truck die. I'll cut the rectangles that are 2 different sizes. I need that smaller one from black, and also a steering wheel. Now I also need this stitched rectangle that's stitched on both sides. This is actually the wheel on the front facing truck. and I'll run that through my die cutting machine. Now because I have a few pieces that I need double of, I'm going to go ahead and run this through a second time. I need both wheels again, and I also need the steering wheel. The steering wheel works with both the side facing and the front facing truck, so you only have one steering wheel you have to worry about. Now this long rectangle that is stitched, I'm going to cut from blue cardstock. Now I've got the smaller stitch circle, my mailbox die, and also the grill for the front of the front facing truck. I also need to cut from gray this long stitched rectangle, and this is going to be the bumper on the front facing truck. So I've got all of those on my gray cardstock, and I'll run that through once, and because I do need 2 of those small stitch circles, I'm going to go ahead and stick that back on the gray cardstock and run it through a second time. Moving on to my yellow cardstock, I need these they're just little ovals, but they will end up being lights. I need to run those through twice. You'll have an extra one left over because you only need 3, but go ahead and run it through twice. Now I've got this smaller stitched rectangle that I need from brown, and now I've got my letter, and now you can cut that from any color cardstock you want. I'm going to go ahead and use craft. I also used red and a few white as well. Now moving on to the side facing truck, I'm going to start putting it together. I like glossy accents. You could also use multimedia matte to put this together. Any liquid glue with a small spout to squirt out with. I'm also using my quick sticks tool to put this all together so I don't get my fingers in glue and get it all over the place. So I first put down my wheels, and then I put down the little, I guess they would be rims or hubcaps, whatever you want to call them, that are gray in the center of those wheels. On the back of the truck, I put the larger of that rectangle, which is red, and then I also inserted the little light in its hole. Now on the actual truck, you've got all these stitched lines where all the pieces go, so it's very simple to put together. Now for my 2 long strips here that are red and blue, I'm going to go ahead and start off with my angled red strip, and I'll just apply some glossy accents to the back of it and put this down. These are stripes on the side of the truck. So on the blue, I'll just go ahead and put glossy accents on the back of it as well, and I'll position it right underneath that red die that I put down first. I found it easier to put down the angled one first, and then I could go ahead and line up the straight blue one underneath it. The angle goes at a certain position on the truck, so I just found it easier to start off with that one. Now that is put together aside from the steering wheel. I'll show you how I put steering wheels on at the very end. Here's a look at the diagram of that side truck. You can find this over on my blog at the link below in the description box. Moving on to the front facing truck, the first thing I needed to do was go ahead and cut 2 very small rectangles to put on the back of this truck so I would have somewhere for the lights to stick to. I just cut some white rectangles from scrap cardstock, and I just put those back there with glossy accents. Now I'll use my quick sticks tool and glossy accents to secure those lights right into place. I've got one more little light to insert right in its little cut opening, and then I'll move on to the tires. Now I found it easiest to put down the glue first on the truck and then just pick up my tires and place those down on top of the glue. Now these fit so nicely on the die cut. Everything was really well thought out with these die cuts. All the little pieces fit perfectly where they belong, so it doesn't get confusing at all. Now I went ahead and put some glue down, and I'll just secure that bumper right in place. It should fit really snugly right up against those tires and also against the little rectangle on the truck itself. Now underneath those lights there are 2 little stitches, and this is where those longer rectangles go that you cut out from red. These are those little reflector lights that are underneath the lights. That's what I interpret them to be, so I'm putting them down as red here. Now I'm also going to secure the little grill in its place, and if you wanted to, you could keep the little cut openings from the grill. You could also cut them from black if you wanted to and insert them inside the 2 little ovals. However, I just left mine white underneath it. So that finishes it for this truck, but I do need to put both steering wheels onto the trucks. So how I did this, because you want them to look like they are inside the truck, I just squirted a little dot of glossy accents on the very bottom of each of these little steering wheels. Now I'm going to pick up the truck and place it right over that steering wheel where it should be, give it a firm press where the glue is, and it should just pick up and lay really nicely inside the truck, so there's no guesswork. And again, that diagram you can find over on my blog if you want to. So for the mailbox, this is very simple to put together. I cut my mailbox from gray, but you could cut it from any color you want to. I went ahead and put down my little flag, and I went ahead and had it raised up. Again, I'm using glossy accents to secure everything down, and that smaller rectangle that you cut from black, the die with two different sized rectangles on it, that smallest one is right over that flag, so it's a seamless look. You could also cut it from gray if you really wanted it to look extremely seamless. I wanted it to stand out a little bit. So for my little post for my mailbox, I cut from brown. I secured that onto the back of my mailbox. And then inside, it's got a little slit that will be cut whenever you cut your mailbox. I just put a little bit of glue right at that slit, and then you can tuck your little letters into it so it looks like they're truly hanging out from the mailbox. I'm telling you, these dies were really, really well thought out. It's always those little details, just like that little slit there, that make it look so realistic. So there's the final diagram of that mailbox put together, and here's one final look at all of these dies completely put together. Now again, you can switch up colors, you can make these into your own creations however you want to, and I highly suggest checking out the design team's creations with this because they are so creative. Everybody's made something different with it. So if you want to find all those diagrams and more information on putting this die set together, you can head over to my blog. That link will be in the description box below. Thank you guys for watching today, and happy crafting.